Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is
Oh, there we go.
music. Cody, it's been a while. December 19th, 2024. How you doing besides looping our music, Cody?
Dude, I'm just so jacked up. I wanted to hear it again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, nothing gets you going quite like the intro to the Couch GMs podcast, right?
Hey, I think that's the first time it happens live. I mean, because in the past we could start over, but we're live now, so you got to hear all the mess ups live and in person.
Live and in person, Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30 East on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for the little transition there, Cody. Make sure you find us there and you can ask your fantasy questions as we go along in our show. If you are finding us when we are not on the air, make sure you hit us in our DMs on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at the Couch GMs. All right, Cody, a lot to talk about as we get into the semifinal week of the fantasy playoffs, but why don't we start off by giving the people an update on the Couch GMs World Cup? Even brought up the tricolored background and everything. Now you're back on it. Here we are, Cody.
I'm always prepared. Don't look
right.
at 2 minutes ago.
I'll bring up the graphic for Group A of the Couch GMs World Cup. So as we saw, the bye weeks, Colin and Bree moving on to round 2. In Group A, we had Sean pulling off a victory against Josh W. He's going against Colin in week 2, and Tyler does beat Sheeler to go against Bree this week. Nothing really too dramatic in this matchup. This was just, they just handled business.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that in most of the World Cup leagues that we've seen, 1, 2, and I think in all 3 leagues, 1, 2, and 3 moved on. It just did the 4 or 5 win, and most of the times they're very close anyways, and a lot of close matchups. But yeah, I think we're getting the best of the best as the season played out, and I know Bree is looking for that championship after another strong regular season where she leads the current spot for a wild card bid, but would like to lock that up and not have to worry about it heading into next year.
And a lot of us would like her to win if we are not in contention in that league, just since we want those wild card spots to open back up. And with her having I think it's a 4-game lead on the wild card right now. Yeah, that's a tough one for some of us to get back on next week.
Awesome. Your wife is in the chat, but I will get to that question once we go through the World Cup recap.
All right, cool. Let's take down the screen here, and we're going to bring up Group B for Cody to talk about. Here we are.
All righty. Group B. There's still me sitting pretty at number 1. Get to play David this week. This league was straight chalk. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're all advancing. Fun fact: in my off week, I put up 144 points. David put up 147. Looks like we're going to have a tough, close matchup as we go into this week. And then Reed and Andrew were the 2 highest scorers, so that one's going to be a battle as well. So 2 good matchups. All 4 of these teams definitely deserve to be where they're sitting right now.
All 4 definitely do deserve to be sitting. And I mean, Cody, your team's been better lately, but you were kind of considering yourself a fraud through most of the season. But that 2-3 matchup, I think, is maybe the most intriguing matchup of the week out of all 3 leagues.
Yeah, I think so. I think these have been 2 of the better teams in terms of points all season long. So looking forward to seeing how that one matches up and who do they get to face coming into the championship weekend.
I like it. One more league to get through. Going to my group in Group C, where I am not lucky enough to be on this bracket. But here's the group of 6. Cole taking care of Mikey B in round 1. He is a 5 beating a 4. That 3-6 matchup in this one ended up very tight. And it's actually the Falcons defense of all things to help Anthony pull through into that 2-3 matchup in this one. So not quite chalk here. I'm interested to see if Nick can hold off Cole since he's been struggling over the past about month or so, even though he was clearly the most dominant team through most of the season. Then Anthony's the hot team who looked like he might have started to cool down last week, but as of now, I think I would favor him over Jim.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that one plays out. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing who makes it into those championship matchups and who secures their spot over the next 2 weeks into the World Cup final in just 2 years.
And then one more year left after this one for people to get those automatic bids. And then we're going to be talking a lot of wild card next year to see if anybody can make it in off of win percentage points.
For sure. But I think that recaps it. We'll be back on Monday, giving you a little bit of preview of what's happening and next week as well. But we got a lot of games to hit on in this week. Oh man, I just blanked on. Is it 16?
16, man. 16.
16 already. Let's preview it. Alrighty. You know, let's kick off the preview with a fan question from your wife, which I do love that she put in there. Cody, since I already have my husband's advice, so George, she doesn't trust you, is what she's saying.
Oh, I expect nothing less.
2 start-sit questions for this week, both half-point PPR. DK versus the Vikings or Brian Thomas versus the Raiders, play 1. And then play 1, Shakir versus the Pats, Devonta Smith versus the Commanders, or Jameis Williams versus the Bears, play 1. Oh, definitely a tough question here. I would play Brian Thomas versus the Raiders in this one over DK. DK has been second fiddle to Jackson Smith and Jigba over the last couple of weeks. So I am leaning on Brian Thomas. The Vikings, they do allow some stuff through the passing game, but Brian Thomas has been like the sole offensive option. So it's definitely not that, high-powered offense that, the Seahawks might have. But Geno Smith is trending to play, but he might not play either, too. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. And then your second one, it's definitely a lot closer for me. But in that one, I'm taking Devonta Smith versus the Commanders. He got healthy last week. He had a big game. I think Jameson Williams is the bigger boomer bust guy. Just doesn't get that consistent amount of catches and yardage to compare it. And then Shakir going up against that Patriots defense in a divisional matchup. Yes, I expect the Bills to win a lot, but Christian Gonzalez has been pretty locked down on the outside, and I think could handle Shakir when he's lined up against him as well. So Devonta Smith, Brian Thomas are my 2 thoughts. George, what was your advice?
I was leaning Brian Thomas in that first one as well. I know it just sounds crazy benching DK. And I think you even brought this up. I'll even kind of spoil a little bit. You and I are going to have a lot of talks today about like when do you play your studs? And I think that this is one of those cases where Thomas might actually end up being your stud. He's actually been better this year, but I would say Thomas in that one. I was really torn on the other. I was leaning Devonta Smith. Didn't know if that was bias. Glad to hear you thought the same exact thing. My number 2 in that lineup was Jameson Williams. Just because like I feel like the Shakir thing with that busy wide receiver room is almost too good to be true. I mean, I could be wrong there, and he's not a bad play, but Jameson is definitely that pop off the top, get some big points kind of player.
Yeah, I definitely think he is the highest, ceiling, upside, biggest flyer. Like if you were down, if you knew you were going to be down, then maybe you can consider Jameis Sin, not Jameis. He's not going to play this week, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm with Devonta Smith against the Commanders, who have a banged up secondary as it is, and I'm going through right now too. And you talked about your studs, just even where DK Metcalf is ranked on the season. I know it's not as high as we once expected, but the page just keeps refreshing to all players, and I don't understand why. But yeah, he is 33rd.
I think somewhere in 30. Yeah, I was going to say somewhere in the 30s.
So definitely has not been the Deebo Samuel that we're accustomed to, where Brian Thomas Jr. is currently wide receiver 7 on the season.
Do you see this other question that came in here?
Why don't you just join the show? You have the link. You could have hopped on, talked to it yourself. But you got Mahomes versus Houston or Herbert tonight. Stafford versus the Jets. Miss you guys. Well, we miss you too.
Miss you too.
Thanks for joining the show. Mahomes, Herbert, or Stafford? I'm taking Stafford.
I'm just double checking. Yeah, that Broncos matchup for Herbert tonight's rough. I would also say Stafford. And this is another situation where it's like, we're not playing Mahomes. No, we're not playing Mahomes. It's been rough. I'll go Stafford.
Yeah, I mean, look what Mac Jones just did on this Jets defense. This isn't the same Jets defense that we thought they were coming into the season. I know Patrick Mahomes is still quarterback 10 on the season, but he has that bum ankle. Playing against Houston, they're going to want to get after him. So I think I'm going to roll with Matt Stafford in this one. The Rams have looked better as of late, now that they got their weapons healthy. But yeah, I'm out on Herbert against the Denver defense. So it's really between Mahomes and Stafford for me, and I'm going to lean Stafford. And for full transparency, I'm, Mahomes and Brock Purdy are my two debates. And after Brock Purdy just completely fell apart last week, and now without another running back, which we'll talk about, and it's like, do I want to go on the waiver wire to start someone over Patrick Mahomes? Because I didn't even think he was going to play. He's going to play this week, which is crazy to me. But I'm going to go with Stafford in this one.
And maybe Stafford's even available in your league. I know he's kind of a 50-50 at this point, so maybe you can even take your own advice and lay Stafford over Mahomes.
Yeah, especially I don't know if Snyder does play Mahomes, then I might have to roll with Mahomes as well in my league because he gets all that Snyder luck. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, that 1 seed in like 4 different leagues this year, man. Why is he even asking us? I didn't even make the playoffs in my World Cup group. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you hear that? Snyder is taking all his fantasy knowledge and holding it from you people by not joining us on the show. But hopefully you get another win this week. And Snyder, hopefully we get a rematch and I get redemption in our league of record next week. If we can,
except for it's not in our league of record. But thanks though.
Oh, I know it's not in the league of record, but I'm talking to him right now.
No,
now
I know, and I'm facing him. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot. You're an afterthought.
Okay, thanks.
But you got that Kurth luck, so.
This show's off the rails. Do you want to start talking games?
Yeah, but I closed my rundown, so I don't know which game's first.
Oh, okay. Well, it's versus Kurth luck, as Tyler said. I figured I would just throw that on there to back you up. You're welcome. We're starting on Saturday. Well, I mean, we'll talk about the Thursday game later on in the show if you're new with us. That is how we end the show. Saturday games, the 4 teams that are playing on Saturday will also be playing on Christmas next Wednesday. Look out for us to preview those games next Monday, which will be a little bit unusual for our usual schedule, but we are still going to get you previews for those games. Make sure you're ready for your fantasy championships next week. Starting off 1 o'clock game on Saturday, Texans at Chiefs. You talked about Patrick Mahomes and how despite his high ankle sprain is pretty much ready to go. I'm surprised too.
He's off. He practiced in full all week. He's off the injury report. He doesn't have a designation heading into the game. The Chiefs are getting a little bit and healthier as we speak. I'm interested to see if Hollywood Brown gets activated off IR right before the game. Not saying I'd go out and pick him up and start him, but it'd be nice to see what happens with him in that offense back and rolling. The Texans, they clinched their division last week, so they're definitely in the playoffs. It's just, how much seeding maneuvering can they do? And always great to knock off the Chiefs when you can. But what about this matchup other than it being simulcast for a Madden cast, which I think is kind of interesting to see how that plays out while there's a college football playoff game going on, this whole weird Saturday schedule, while everyone else is trying to, cram in their last minute Christmas shopping and wants to watch football, but also has to be carrying bags for their significant other in the mall.
That's why streaming on phones has been maybe the greatest invention for football in the world, for being honest.
Hey, I think you're right there. But if you're, if we're kind of out on Patrick Mahomes in this matchup, does that mean, there wasn't really a Chiefs option. Like, who do you feel? Kelsey? Like, do you trust Pacheco? Like, that's another stud. Would you play him?
I think a lot of people found other options in that backfield when he was out. And if that's the case and it's gotten here, I'd keep rolling with whatever you have. If you're desperate, you can play Pacheco. But even when Kareem Hunt was in, if you're somebody that replaced Pacheco directly with Kareem Hunt, like, it wasn't fantastic. So no, I'm kind of sticking with somebody else if you have it.
All right. Then on the Texans side, I know Joe Mixon's a little bit banged up, but sounds like he is good to go as well. So him and Nico Collins are the only people I'm rolling out there this week. I don't want to take the high flyers in the first game with Tank Dell, or I guess technically the second game with Tank Dell. I don't need to roll out Dalton Schultz.
I'm sorry, I had too many shares of Tank Dell. I'm grieving at the moment.
I understand. I tried to tell you, Nico Collins.
Nico Collins was the answer, and we'll know better next year. Second game on Saturday, 4:30. Again, during a college football playoff game. We have to mention something about the college football playoff since we're unofficially a college football podcast. Steelers at Ravens. Steelers got round one in this one. This game now, the Steelers can clinch the division with a win, and with a loss, I believe the Ravens temporarily take the lead. This is a big matchup for playoff seeding in the actual NFL.
Yeah, it's really interesting too for the Steelers, like because these teams basically flip, they get the Chiefs next week, which will be another tough matchup. So like they have a lot to play for. Where I mean the Ravens, they obviously want to keep fighting for their division, but like no one thought the Steelers were going to be here. They're not going to have George Pickens again, which is going to definitely hurt their offense. So it's really going to come down to that defense. I know TJ Watt is even a little bit banged up. He's going to play, but how effective is he going to be? I do like the Ravens in this one. Outside of, sure, the running backs, as in Najee Harris, can roll out there as an RB2 or flex if you need it, because the Ravens defense isn't the elite of the elite like it used to be. But maybe Fry meet the tight end. But outside of that, I'm not streaming Russell Wilson this week. I'm not chasing Calvin Austin or Van Jefferson, none of that. So definitely think the Ravens have the upper hand on that side of the ball.
No, and this would end up being the week that out of nowhere the Steelers put up one of their 40-point games, which never happens in Ravens Steelers, but when we're not expecting it is when the Steelers do those kind of things. But I'm still convinced that their offense just isn't quite there without George Pickens. Like they're very reliant on him. And I know they have a bunch of other weapons and they're a run first team and whatever, but it concerns me with their entire offense not having Pickens to take some of the pressure off of the backs. I'm not rolling Warren. If you have to roll Najee, you can, but I don't like it either.
Yeah, outside of like Lamar and Derrick Henry, right? Like those are probably the only two people I feel comfortable playing with. And even Derrick Henry had a slow week last week against this good Steelers defense, so it might not be like the game-winning week as well, but you're definitely playing those studs. But even on
Zay
like the
Flowers is more than likely in a lineup just because of his boom potential.
Right, but to my point, like that's not a guy I'm loving playing this week. Like there's this Saturday slate, like is kind of one that I'm like, man, I hope I don't got too many players so I can kind of just box score check, see what happens, and not have to, and let's sweat it out on Sunday and Monday and not worry about these tough matchups, especially in fantasy.
You see, I've going from 1:00 college football playoff to that Ravens Steelers game for reasons of, Ravens fan in the house, and then get to watch that Tennessee Ohio State game at 8:00, which is definitely the best game of the first round of the playoff.
Yeah, I just with the holidays next weekend or next week, like I don't know if I can give up a whole weekend, but I don't want to do anything but watch football. Saturday,
Exactly.
Sunday,
Thanks,
and
college
Monday.
football playoff, for finally doing something right, but now really messing with our pre-Christmas schedule here.
For sure.
This is where we need Christmas on a weekend, but it's not going to hit that way for a few more years.
At least I don't think next year, I think we've talked about this and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole either. Next year, there won't be a Wednesday game because Christmas Day will be Thursday. So it'll at least be college football owned Saturday, normal schedule on Sunday, unless the NFL wants to try to sneak in a Saturday game just because they can. If they like, they're going to have better ratings than Penn State SMU because the Chiefs are playing there. I think that Steelers Ravens versus heck, what is it? Why do I always forget
Texas game?
The Texas Arizona State.
Yeah.
Because Indiana Notre Dame play tomorrow night. That one, that ratings thing is going to be very interesting to me. Like Texas is a powerhouse team, but like Arizona State's not that. No, Arizona's yeah. Does Arizona State have the fourth bye?
Keep talking.
Dude, I'm so confused. But it doesn't matter. I'm completely blanking on the college football playoffs, but we got to talk more games. Let's get into the Sunday slate.
It's Clemson, Texas.
Thank you. Welcome. Clemson, Texas. That one's actually a bigger draw than Arizona State.
Yes.
But now I'm going to be interested to see if we're going to get Saturday games competing in the future as well, if this is a one-time thing because of which day the holiday falls. But we got Sunday football to get to before the holidays anyways. Let's start with Cardinals, Panthers. Not a lot to talk about in this one. In the play your stutters or not, you're playing James Conner.
Yep.
How do you feel about rolling out Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I think if there's a matchup that I'm more comfortable playing him in, it's probably going to be this one. Just because I feel like, I mean, I know he's super touchdown dependent, and if I'm going to be confident he's going to go out there and score a touchdown in any game, the Panthers is pretty high up on my list. So I'm cool with rolling him out.
Yeah, I think that is worth, I'd play him as well. And then on the Panthers side, obviously you're playing Chuba. And then the question is Thielen, and then also Jalen Coker. I know he was a high waiver target after his big game this past week.
If you're somebody who's still in the playoffs and has a roster spot for Jalen Coker, number one, I'm impressed. I shouldn't say roster spot, a starting spot for Jalen Coker, I'm impressed. If you added him, I feel like it was probably more of an insurance policy. So I would say yes to Thielen if you need the spot in the flex. Not touching Coker in my lineup, but I do like the ad as just a bench depth kind of piece.
Yeah, I'm with you. It is a West Coast team coming east at 1 o'clock, which we always know that those teams can start slow, at least for the Arizona Cardinals. And it's going to be a cold day, at least in Carolina standards. It'll be a high of 40. So that's always interesting this
It's
time
actually
of
worth
year.
noting, yeah, a lot of these Sunday games are going to be very cold, which won't matter for a lot of these teams, but I think there's a couple in the 1 o'clock window that I have to watch out for.
Definitely. And, two teams that aren't going to be worried about the cold is Browns at Bengals. I know we're going to talk about the Thursday night matchup, but the Bengals are going to have a close eye on that one to see if it's even worth, do they have anything still to fight for, depending on the outcome of the Thursday night game. They get to play the Cleveland Browns, which big news, they are benching Jameis Winston for young quarterback Dorian Thompson
Robinson.
Thompson Robinson, man.
That's
DTR.
a tongue twister. Yep.
DTR. So they're benching him, which I don't understand, other than like wanting to get the guy that you've kind of already seen a look. But like, I feel like yes, Winston threw the interceptions. Yes, he, had some of the boneheaded plays, but he brought some like life back to the team. He made them team watchable. I think he got the fans more involved. I don't think anybody wants to go and watch DTR go out there and play. And the question is, what is the trickle down effect for guys like Jerry Jeudy? Jerry Jeudy averaged 21.1 points with Jameis Winston in terms of fantasy. He had 10 with everyone else. What does that mean for him?
I mean, obviously, still scoring 10 is, a playable receiver at this point. And he's probably somebody who's gotten you through the last month and a half. I think he's still okay to roll out, but I think you really have to temper expectations. I don't think he's going to go out there and get you that 20-point week this week. But it's nice to see him having success, and it's still possible. I'm just still infuriated that they decided to bench Jameis Winston, except for the fact that maybe they're trying to see if DTR should still be on the roster next year, and they're not expecting Winston to be. But I think Winston's done enough to at least show he should. I mean, he could even have a chance to start if they just want to throw Deshaun Watson as a QB2 and just eat his contract basically next year. But at the least, he's going to be a backup somewhere next year. I know he's high, big boom bust. He throws a lot of picks, but he can still ball.
Yeah, and if just because I know Jerry Jeudy has helped galvanize my team, I'm sure done for a lot of you, and I am on the fence if I'm going to play him or not with DTR starting because I see stats like this and I want to share it with you guys. So there's 89 quarterbacks that are active that have thrown at least 100 passes.
Okay.
Which is kind of wild, but there's 89 of them in the league. Here's where DTR ranks. Completion rate, 88th. Yards per attempt, 89th. Touchdowns, 89th. Interception rate, 84th, which would be okay. Adjusted yards per attempt, 88th. Passer rating, 88.
So about as bad as you can get.
About as bad as you can get. The only saving grace, like if they were not playing the Cincinnati Bengals defense, there is not a shot in the dark I would play Jerry Jeudy. But because that tantalizing Bengals defense that gives up a lot of points is out there, I'm like, okay, maybe I can keep him in my lineup.
So tell me this isn't the week that the Bengals are going to give up 30 points because I think there's a good chance that they can hold DTR under 30. But even if he scores 21, you need one of those touchdowns to go to Jerry Jeudy, and you're looking at least a 10-point week if you're thinking about it.
Yeah. wanted to go back and look before the podcast, and I apologize to listeners for poor planning, to see what the numbers were, or what the target looks like once DTR got in last week too. If it kind of slowed down for Judy, or if he was able to still get involved.
Well, if you figured that one out, feel free to we'll throw it on our Twitter account. So make sure you're following us, and we'll see if Cody can put together some homework since he failed us on the show. Plus, I hope Neil's listening, and I can throw some proper pre-production planning prevents piss poor performance at you.
Oh man, Neil's going to be just as mad as he found out I had an untoasted Pop-Tart this morning.
Speaking of that, there's a Pop-Tart bowl now apparently, and the trophy is a real working toaster. It's pretty cool.
I love how we're sometimes a college football podcast, and like that happened last year, and like George is just now coming around to it, and he's like, "That's so cool." But yeah, you didn't see all the memes of the Pop-Tart mascot and all that fun stuff. That might be 2 years ago now. Like, welcome to 2024. It's almost 2025.
Yeah,
but you'll get there eventually.
Thank you. I'm still back in 2022. I'm catching up.
Wow, back in 2022, what a time to be alive. Probably the last time you were in the, most of your fantasy league playoffs, unlike this year.
Lions, Bears. My gosh, that one hurt.
I'm sorry.
Lions at Bears. No David Montgomery, I think, is the biggest news to report on for the Lions. So tell me how Jahmyr Gibbs is going to take more carries than he usually does and literally just destroy people to win a fantasy championship.
Yeah, I think if you have Gibbs, you're going to feel really good moving on. Like, you were already feeling good with him in the split, and now you get him as the full workhorse. But I talked about this on Monday. I'm going to say it again today. I'm not playing him this week, but I am putting an anytime touchdown bet on Craig Reynolds.
And play him in DFS because I'm sure he is extremely cheap. And he's going to get carries.
For sure. Detroit loves him. So definitely think he'll be out there for sure.
Interested to see what the split looks like. But otherwise, I mean, you're playing your guys on Detroit. You can still throw out Laporta, obviously Amra. Goff could be a streamer in this game against the Bears. I mean, he's been a borderline streamer starter for most of the year, I feel like. I mean, he's kind of inconsistent out of the dome is the only thing I'm worried about.
Yeah, I outside the dome is definitely worth noting. Now, if you remember the last time these two teams played, it was Thanksgiving Day, and that was the day before Matt Eberflus got fired because of the poor clock management. So that will be something worth noting. Can the Bears keep it interesting? But they're eliminated from playoff competition. They don't have much to play for. Will they be down enough, though, to play a guy like Keenan Allen, who continues to have terrible first halves, but then the Bears are down and catches some touchdowns and saves your day? Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. I'm not going there with Roma Dunze quite yet.
No.
Even DeAndre Swift against this banged up Detroit defense. Like, are you okay playing the Bears playmakers this week?
Now, we talk about the divisional games can be kind of weird. And if we're expecting it to be a little bit closer, one, because of Goff out of the dome, and two, because of divisional game, maybe you're not going to get the benefit of having the extra, passing attempts to play Keenan Allen. What I would say, though, is they've been feeding targets to DJ Moore ever since the offensive coordinator change. So I think he's kind of slowly become a more respectable play. I'm trying to see if I can find his numbers really quick. So he was getting like 4, 5, 6 targets pre coordinator change. 16 in that Detroit game. He has 8 the last 2 weeks. He's broken 10 half PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games. So I think he's the one I would go with, and I would leave it there.
Yeah, I do think if you're struggling, if you have a lot of injuries, you need a flex play. I think Keenan Allen is in play. I don't love it, but there is some guys that will, if you had to go between Keenan Allen and heck, even like Jerry Jeudy, right? Like that one's a the matchup's better. There's not a new quarterback, but Judy's been playing a lot better. That's kind of like a very interesting situation. I would still go Judy in that one, but I think we're a lot closer to that conversation than we were in the previous weeks.
Definitely. I agree with that.
Alrighty, Rams at Jets. And before we get to this game, we just got to talk a little bit about it. One, I don't know if you've been watching. I watched the first episode last night. Aaron Rodgers, the Enigma, whatever it's called. It's actually a pretty good documentary so far. Interesting. I think it's very fitting that it starts you to paraphrase, it was like either love him or you hate him. And I feel like that explains Rodgers in a nutshell. But even bigger news than that was The Athletic dropped a kind of a bombshell article on the Jets organization as a whole. And we were just talking about Jerry Jeudy, and we've talked about this before. They had a trade in line for Jerry Jeudy to come to the Jets this offseason. Eventually, the owner vetoed the trade, and it came out in this Athletic article that the Broncos said that the reason it was vetoed was because Jerry Jeudy's Madden rating was too low. What?
Because you know what the most accurate depiction of how football goes is? Madden. No,
Well,
not even close.
it makes you think. At the time Aaron Rodgers was traded, his Madden rating, 96. Like, but that was like the most head catching, line in that whole article. I don't know how much of you read, if you read the whole thing or you took some other snippets from it, but did you see back in, I think it was 2022, and Mike White was starting? He had a really bad game. He got hurt. He played through some broken ribs, had a rough game. He was in the locker room throwing down his helmet. He was upset with how he played, but he just battled out with broken ribs for a Jets team that wasn't going anywhere. And basically, Woody Johnson, their owner, said, "You better throw your helmet, you blink and suck," and end up having to apologize to him for the way, because he heard it. And then this past year, after the interim coach got their first win, Aaron Rodgers had a game ball, and very common when the interim head coach or a new coach gets their first win, you give the game ball to them. Woody Johnson basically came into the locker room and let his son do the game, jump in front and give a game ball to Garrett Wilson. And it was described that, now granted, Garrett Wilson made one heck of a catch that game that they won, so he was warranted of it, but it said the player said it just felt like all the energy was drained because an outsider came in, and seems like he has too much hand in the football operations, and it's probably why the Jets have the longest drought in drought of making the playoffs in the NFL.
Definitely. So now the two things I kind of want to go look at is hearing all this information that's come out. Do you know how they do like an NFL Players Association like team ratings at the end of like during every offseason where they'll rate like ownership and facilities and all that? I'm interested to go back now and look at the Jets ratings and see if we see any hints of like, ooh, that could be a problem. And then also we're going to see if this keeps accelerating now and becomes the latest Dan Snyder situation where the NFL kind of slowly pushes him out if this keeps happening.
I don't think it'll go that far until there's like
some actual legal issue.
Yes. I mean, like, running your team poorly, he's not the first owner to do it. I mean,
just ask the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Browns, the Bears. Like, there are some bad teams in the NFL. I don't think we're going to get to that situation, but it's definitely worth noting as they're interviewing for GMs right now. They have the Aaron Rodgers decision. Do they bring him back for another year? Does a new GM want him? There's a lot of question marks, and once again, the Jets are going to be in the limelight this offseason. But we got 2 weeks left, or 3 weeks left of the regular season, and they host the Rams, another West Coast team coming east at 1:00.
In the cold.
In the cold. Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams is good. The Rams gave up a lot of points the last couple weeks. Their defense has been a little bit deceptible. Do you trust the Rodgers-Adams connection to stream Aaron Rodgers this week?
I'll say yes. He's not really high on my list.
Would you do it over Mahomes?
I
because
feel like
I'm debating
Mahomes is
it.
the line this year, this week. I'll go with I'll play Mahomes, but Rodgers is probably right under that. And on the flip side, I'd play Stafford just above. But I think this could be a bit of a shootout. It was nice to see a little bit of like vintage Rodgers and Adams action last week. I think it's just I'm still gun shy because of how bad the season's been that I'm worried it's a 1 week wonder, but I do think that there's something starting to brew with those two having a couple weeks together again.
So just for fun, because I brought him up, I don't know if you saw this comparison that went kind of viral earlier in the week. Patrick Mahomes, these are straight stats, not fantasy stats,
Okay.
versus Aaron Rodgers. Patrick Mahomes, he has 3,348 yards on the season to Aaron Rodgers 3,255, so about 100 difference.
Mhm.
He has 22 passing touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers has him by 1 at 23. Mahomes has 11 INTs. Rodgers only has 8. Their passer rating is 91 and 90.8. And then, so like they've almost been identical quarterbacks
Yeah.
statistically this season. And people are ready to say, Aaron Rodgers has to retire. He's completely washed. And then Mahomes, on the other hand, has the 5th best odds to win MVP.
That's absolutely crazy. And a lot of it has to do with record.
For
People
sure.
around him.
At least the MVP race has a lot to do with record.
Of course.
But it's just something interesting too. It's like Mahomes isn't that guy that we've said this all season long, but like as you're getting down to this, like especially in your fantasy playoffs with Mahomes, if you decide not to play Mahomes this week, you can just cut him. You're not playing him against Pittsburgh if you're not going to play him against Houston.
Fair.
So, like,
and if someone wants to play Mahomes against Pittsburgh next week against you in a championship, and then they beat you with him, good for them. It's probably not because of Mahomes.
Exactly. I think that's an interesting situation. But let's talk about the Rams side. And the Rams, you just play your studs.
Yep.
Because that's all the Rams do is throw it to their studs.
Except for last week in Cooper Kupp, but I'm thinking there's going to be a little bit of a, I don't want to say overcorrection, but a correction to the mean.
There might even be an overcorrection. Like he'll probably out target Puka Nacua this week.
Yeah. Not saying that both of them can't have a big game. I think this could be a shootout.
Could be
You're
10 targets to 9 targets, but it'll be more than Puka Nacua.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a good chance that you could see touchdowns out of Kyron, Puka, and Kupp in this game.
Yeah, should be a fun one as long as there's not too much of a slow start as we that West Coast coming east, as I like to remind you. Then another game featuring a New York team. They get to host the Falcons.
No, the Falcons are hosting them.
That's what I meant. I can't read. I'm just
so
excited.
No weather problems in this one. This one's in a dome.
And Michael Penix Jr., the 8th overall pick, gets the start. Kirk Cousins heads to the bench after they got the win on Monday Night Football, but again, another poor performance by him. He has had a really rough last month, 6 weeks of the season so far. Fun fact: Michael Penix said during an interview this week that he was at Costco with the girlfriend about to get a hot dog when he got the call that he was going to be the starter, which is like so relatable. Which I love that for him. And all I'm going to say before we break down this game is people roasted the Atlanta Falcons for taking Michael Penix Jr. at 8th overall.
Yep.
If Michael Penix quote unquote saves their season to get them into the playoffs, because they beat the Bucks twice, which is wild. They still have a pretty decent shot to make it if they keep winning, and they have a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. That's why you have to wait and see with some of these things. And we have all offseason to talk about where Kirk Cousins goes next or from here. But we can talk about this game if you would like.
I think this is going to be a really big game when you talk about how the Falcons are going to be perceived in the offseason. Game they should win. Are they going to make the playoffs? And are they going to be roasted for drafting Penix at number 8? Or are they going to be roasted for signing a guy coming off at 30-something years old, coming off an Achilles injury to a major contract? So, like, are they going to be roasted for the Penix pick, or are they going to be roasted for Cousins? But really, because of the matchup, I think this is the perfect opportunity to get a fresh face in there. We've seen good matchups for Kirk Cousins lately, and it just hasn't been working. I think he's missing that Vikings coaching staff a lot more than we thought. And I think there's something to be said about someone at his age trying to come back and play professional football off of that Achilles. Nothing against him. He's still a solid player. It's not working for him right now. So I think this is going to be a good time to inject the youth and that excitement into this Falcons team to give a shot at that playoff run. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are trying to like be concerned. Do we still play our Falcons weapons with the rookie quarterback in? I almost feel better about them if you've been playing them regardless, because you haven't been getting much play out of the quarterback position. I don't think it can get any worse going to Penix than it has been over the last month and a half with Cousins.
I think it depends on who you're playing. So, because, with Cousins, like, I'm not playing Ray McLeod. I didn't love playing him anyways.
No. Got you.
Right? Even Darnell Mooney. I don't know if I love Darnell Mooney with Michael Penix Jr. this week. Like, I'm still probably going to – Drake London is still probably stud enough to roll him out there. Okay, right? Kyle Pitts, it's the tight end, whatever. Bijan Robinson, 100%. But that's it. Like, I know Darnell Mooney is still a top 20 wide receiver on the season. I'm going to have to wait and see a week. I know you can't really wait and see in the playoffs, but I think I would look elsewhere at, people that even we get picked up this week, like McMillan from the Bucks, or even a Coker for the Panthers against the Cardinals, instead of playing Darnell Mooney this week.
I was about to throw names out there like that we had the questions of before, like Shakir, Devontae Smith, Jamison Williams, some of those bubble flex guys, but you're like, you got him way below those guys.
Yeah. I'm pretty much out on Darnell Mooney.
I think I'm probably slightly more bullish on Darnell Mooney, but I definitely don't love the play. But no, I think London's cool. Same with Pitts. So we're not too far off on our thoughts here.
And then how about the Giants side? They're going to start, who did I see? Not DeVito.
Locke?
I think Locke's going to be back this week. If not, heck, maybe it'll be Tim Boyle. It's been ugly for them either way. So really, there's only two names to talk about: Malik Neighbors and Tyron Tracy Jr., who had a pretty bad week one in the fantasy playoffs. He didn't get the goal line touchdown. Singletary sniped that from him. Better matchup though this week. Would you play him again this week if you needed, a running back 2 or a flex?
I don't think I can. And it's mostly because I saw Singletary checking in way more than I was comfortable with. It's already a rocky situation when you're a running back on a bad team. There's a chance you fall behind. You don't really have a lot of opportunities near the goal line. But then when you see that they're willing to throw in Singletary to potentially take some goal line carries away, I just don't think there's enough upside.
Yeah, I would still play Tracy this week in certain situations, right? Like, it's not like I'm forcing him in my lineup, because we're talking about running back 29 in the season, half point PPR, although he did have a late surge. But for me, it's he still saw 4 targets last week. He's still like the second number 2 passing option. He had 10 targets 2 weeks ago. He only had 10 at rushing attempts, but they were down early and a lot. This game might be a little bit closer. So I think I would play him. Now, if you want to, do the game where you rattle off names, would I play him over? Like, I'd play Jerome Ford over him, who people picked up this week. But like with no Breece Hall, I'd play Tracy over Braylon Allen, right? Like,
okay, I can see it.
I have to look at more games. I don't want to just hear and look at that. But as we go through, we talk about more running backs. I can tell you if I'd play Tracy over them. But you might be in a situation. I'd play Tracy over whichever 49ers running back you think is going to be the boom guy this week. Now that Garendo, not to get too far ahead, is most likely going to be out. Like, I'd probably play him over whichever Patriots running back against the Bills, probably over the Jaguar guys, probably over Madison. So it's like that tier, right? Like, I'm not saying go play Tracy over Brian Robinson Jr. or over Chuba Hubbard, but I think he is at least an option in your lineup. But you just know your expectations. Like, he's going to be a guy that might only get you 4 this week.
Very true. I like it. And if you have any start-sit questions involving him or anything else, make sure you drop them in the comments. We got to get moving, Cody. We are We're running some time this episode.
All right, Eagles Commanders.
Yep. That should be an easy one, I think.
No, it's not.
They never are. Because it's the Commanders' weapons you're talking about. Because the last time that the Commanders played the Eagles, Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin both had bad games.
Exactly. So this is the ultimate question. This is the guy I was thinking about the minute I said, do you play your studs? Terry McLaurin, well, him and Jerry Jeudy, both are top 10 wide receivers on the season. Not loving playing Jerry Jeudy this week. Not loving playing the Commanders. Like, I'm trying to buy myself and sell myself into, all right, well, they've seen him once. They know it was a bad game. They're going to overcorrect and try to force him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
As the Eagles fan, even though they're your second favorite team, do you think that's a possibility, or do you think McLaurin is going to be a loser or a person that knocks a lot of people out this week?
I mean, I think there's definitely plenty of opportunities for McLaurin to have a bad week, but I will say this. The Commanders are usually a thorn in the Eagles' side. That game earlier this year was an anomaly. I have not seen a game where McLaurin has not ripped the Eagles apart except for the first game this year. So that was an anomaly. So until I see it multiple times, I'm going to think that McLaurin's going to find some more space. I would think that this would be a game more comparable to how you saw the Rams receivers play against the Eagles secondary. Maybe they didn't completely pop off, but you saw Nakua and Cup both find a little bit of space, have some success, move the ball a little bit. So I don't see the Commanders going out there putting up 35 points and showing the Eagles defense that like there's still some flaws. But I think there's going to be space to be had. There's some familiarity with it being a divisional game. It's going to be a lot more similar to how the year has been as opposed to that first matchup they had, which was also a Thursday night. You have to remember too. Thursday night football is chaotic to start with.
That's definitely an interesting. I know that's going to be the guy that I'm going to debate all the way up until kickoff at 1:00. If I play my stud, which is often our advice, or if I try to swap him out for like Jalen McMillan.
Let me also hit you with this. So when you say play your studs, and I get it, Jerry Jeudy's a top 10 wide receiver right now. Jerry Jeudy wasn't stud status coming into this season. He's somebody who you probably had on your bench, more than likely picked up off the waiver wire, and has kind of like saved you. You drafted Terry McLaurin to start for you. He's stud status. He's somebody who you were expecting something out of all year, and he's been delivering. Judy's a little bit more of a surprise, who maybe you even have a different person in your flex consideration to kind of replace that player. I think this is a little bit of a different call than the Jeudy call is.
I mean, I get what you're saying about draft season, but in terms of getting to the playoffs, like there hasn't really been a wide receiver over the last 6 weeks more valuable than Jerry Jeudy. And, outside of like Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, Amon St. Brown, like the guys that you expected to be up there. Jamar Chase. That was the name I was blanking on. It's also interesting that McLaurin, the other thing that's in there is like he had the 2 touchdowns last week. Does that regress? And that's just me going down a rabbit hole of trying to overthink things. And that's when I'm at my worst, not just going with my gut and playing the guys I want to play. But the rest of them, yeah, Brian Robinson, you play. Jaden Daniels, sure. If you want to play, you're playing him at quarterback. If you want all the equals, you can play.
Yeah, I think that wraps that one up. Last game in the early window, Titans Colts. Titans coach went on a rampage in a press conference earlier this week, and Mason Rudolph set to start as they benched Will Levis yet again. Very much a mess in Tennessee.
Not yet again. He was hurt. This is very clear.
Fair.
He was hurt
the last first time.
He did not get benched. This is his first benching. Want to make that clear.
Sorry.
But it's about time.
No more meme-worthy interceptions, at least for the moment.
Unfortunately. But Mason Rudolph didn't look great when he got in for relief there. Like, there's not really anybody I love in this matchup. Like,
Jonathan Taylor's your best bet. Not
Tony
saying
Pollard,
I love that.
Tony Pollard's a little bit banged up too. He actually got out-snapped by Tajay Spears because of it last week. Like, it's going to be a rough matchup, Titans Colts, in terms of fantasy this week for me.
Yeah, I think you're limiting at probably Jonathan Taylor, somebody who you've had in your lineup most of the year. I mean, he was a drop ball at the half-yard line away from like an 18.5 PPR point week last week, so he's doing okay. And the catches, I mean, yeah, the carries are there. Outside of that, I don't like any of the Titans with the quarterback change, with the fact that you have Spears mixing in with, in that running back room. So I'm with you.
For sure. All right, let's kick off this late window. Vikings at Seahawks with a fan question.
I like it.
All right. Sup, do I start Kenneth Walker over Marv at my flex? All right. So I think the first thing we got to look at is the running back room in Seattle, both as of Wednesday, because Seattle does not like to put their injury report out any earlier. Charbonnet and Ken Walker did not participate. Walker has missed the last 2 games. Charbonnet has an oblique injury. So that one we're going to have to follow through more and more as the week progresses. So I'm going to kind of put this in like 3 different scenarios. One, if both play. One, if now, so they said Ken Walker just practiced in full today. It is not updated on the website that I'm looking at, but that's what he threw in the chat there. So if
Thank you.
that's the case, I was going to say, if Ken Walker plays and Charbonnet doesn't, I'm playing Ken Walker.
Mm-hmm.
If Ken Walker doesn't play, obviously I'm playing Marvin Harrison Jr. My question for you is, if both Ken Walker and Charbonnet play, do you still trust that over Marvin Harrison Jr.? I know which way I'm leaning, but I want to hear your thoughts.
I do. And I think it's because there's a long record in Seattle of if Ken Walker plays, he gets majority of the carries. And if he is actually practicing in full on a Thursday, I think there's a pretty clear path to him getting his normal workload. And as much as I did say earlier, I like Marvin Harrison's chance to score a touchdown this week because of the good matchup. I don't think you can beat the boom potential of Ken Walker the way that he's been able to do this in his career. So I'm going Ken Walker.
Yeah, that's the one I would go with. And he did practice in full, which is very interesting to me.
They never let us do our homework pre-show on their specifically injury report because they always release it after we go on air.
Yep, I like that. So Ken Walker it is over Marvin Harrison Jr., and best of luck in your fantasy matchup this week. With that said, we got to talk about this other game, the other players. We already kind of hit on it when we talked about Bree. DK, we're a little bit lower on. JSN has been the guy, the number 1 target there. I didn't check to see. I think should have just looked while I had this up where we're at with Geno Smith. Geno Smith is also a full participant as well after being a full participant on Wednesday. So he is good to go. So I think JSN is a lock in your lineup.
Yep.
DK, he's most likely in your lineup. Tyler Lockett, I'm not even playing him. He might even be on the injury report, but that's where I'm at with him.
I mean, I don't think he's even rostered in a lot of places at this point. So yeah, that's.
And then you're playing both. You're playing all the Vikings.
Playing all the Vikings. Jones, Hawkinson, Addison, Jefferson.
Yep.
Darnold?
All. Ooh, Darnold, stream versus the Seahawks. That's actually
the Seahawks are one of the most intriguing teams to me because I feel like they're a decent team. They have a good record, but you look at it, it's like their defense against most positions is poor. I'm not exactly sure what their numbers will like against the quarterback, but they're a green matchup against, I think, running backs and receivers. And then it's a good team. Like their team.
I'm streaming Darnold.
Weird. I don't know. You're streaming Darnold?
Yeah, I'm gonna right after we get off of this. So if your name is Derek and you're listening to the show, I'm gonna go see if he's available in our league of record and play him over Patrick Mahomes.
There we go. I like it. It's bold.
But I got to be bold. Beat the highest scoring team in the league.
To get to a championship, especially when you're talking about a position where it's like, I don't really have this locked up. Mahomes isn't a stud at the quarterback position anymore.
At least not this year.
Fantasy.
Unless that playoff ankle ignites something.
Ankle. You're right, man.
All right, Jags Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Thomas Jr. and then just go. That's it. And Brock Bowers. I always forget about Brock Bowers.
You always forget about Brock because of the team.
Because of the tight end position. Like,
man, I was so prepared to ask you a start-sit question between like DJ Moore, Brian Thomas, Isaac Guerrero, and that's kind of all just fallen apart for me because of the Guerrero injury we'll get to in a few seconds. So, yeah, play Brian Thomas.
Brian Thomas and McCormick hit IR. So Georgia's favorite running back, Alexander Madison, is in line to be a start, but I still wouldn't play him, even though it
I
is
would not
limited
either.
round.
No, Sincere McCormick was giving us some hope. I was just worried about all the splits that were happening. And now it probably still will be a split. We'll see a couple of carries for Abdullah, and Madison will be underwhelming, but like get some carries.
All right, Patriots Bills flex to prime time. I think the NFL saw this slate and was like, "Hey, can we get Josh Allen on here?" But
I mean, there's some games that should have been good. I mean, that Vikings Seahawks game is definitely not bad. The Niners Dolphins game is not as exciting as it should be.
it could be pretty good still, though. But we're going to talk Patriots Bills real quick. I don't think you can expect another 40-point performance from Josh Allen.
We said this last week.
Yeah, but I really do mean that this week. The Patriots defense is better than people give them credit for. Obviously, they'll still score points, but being divisional, he'll have a modest 28-day performance. Not 40, but still a good day.
So those people that have been riding his coattails into the playoffs and through the first week are going to have to rely on their team actually this week.
Unfortunately, that's what it sounds like from our World Cup team.
Good luck. You didn't even get one of those. I should say both of those didn't even matter for you because you were basically already locked into a bye and then got a bye. So
Correct.
congratulations on not needing those 2 weeks you got.
Exactly. It just made my record look a little bit better for wild card seeding, but outside of that, it's all it did for me.
But so playing James Cook, the receivers are the interesting thing in Buffalo because I throw Shakir's name out a lot. He's actually been very consistent, the most consistent of the group. But it just concerns me because they have so many other mouths to feed there with Dalton Kincaid, with Amari Cooper, with Keon Coleman now back as of next week or last week. Like, where do you go, if anywhere?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough question with the receivers. Shakir seems to be like the safest one because he just seems to be kind of like that guy. Keon Coleman gets a big play every once in a while. I think it's between those two. For me, like Shakir's the safe one, Keon Coleman's the high upside one. But I have a question, and I don't even know. Like we didn't talk about him on a waiver wire, and because I don't know if I believe it, but one Mr. Ty Johnson, the running back. Now I don't think he's probably not even owned, right?
Yeah.
But here's his stat line the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, he had 2 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Okay. That's one good week. His second touchdown on the season, whatever. But then last week, he followed that up with 5 catches for 114 yards. And it's like, okay, they've been struggling to find like a pass catcher. Are they working this guy in? Like, I'm not playing him this week. Maybe in a DFS lineup, I'll pair him with Craig Reynolds and spend a lot of money on wide receivers. But like, should he be owned?
No.
Nope.
I'm throwing last week out the window. How often are you going to see the Bills score 48 points? Not often. And you can almost say the same thing about 2 weeks ago because how often are you going to see the Bills score 42 and Josh Allen do what he did? Not often. And then also when you look at the stats, I mean, it's a little bit less so 2 weeks ago because there was just no rushing attempts to go around if your name wasn't Josh Allen's, particularly on quarterback sneaks, it seemed like. But he's not even the running back 2 in snaps, I believe, in most of the time. 2 weeks ago, I can't really tell. Last week, he was out touched significantly by Ray Davis still. So
Okay.
with him not even being second on the depth chart, if you want a handcuff for James Cook, I'm going Ray Davis. And he's going to be a guy that's almost like Justice Hill on the Ravens, where like you're going to see these games he has. It's like, oh, wow, that's kind of intriguing. Do I add him? He's just not going to have the consistent usage to make it worth beating up a bench spot.
All right. I like it. Let's talk 49ers Dolphins before we get into Sunday Night Football as we hit the hour mark. So we definitely got to pick this up before Thursday night starts. And we can't even talk about the game because it's already started. 49ers at the Dolphins. My one fantasy team, this was going to be the game of the year because I had so many of them. But now it's like, oof. Garendo, that's the big news.
Yep.
Most likely not going to play. They're down to Patrick Taylor. Keyshawn Vaughn is on their practice squad, and I can never remember the guy's name behind Patrick Taylor.
It's a really
Izzy.
long name.
His nickname's
Yeah.
Izzy. That's all you
Yeah.
need to know.
Izzy Wonka or whatever his name. I think it's something like that.
Yeah, he was on the Jets Hard
Mhm.
Knock season, but I think that's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. I mentioned it last week. Like, does Deebo Samuel get more in the backfield? But after his game performance in the rain, I'm not trusting Deebo Samuel in my lineup
No.
at all. So that one's a tough one. Brock Purdy, 4-point performance a week ago. Do you trust him out there against the Dolphins team, which is actually pretty good against quarterbacks? But the Dolphins don't have really anything to play. I guess they have. Well, I guess it depends on what happens tonight as well for them, kind of needing a miracle to make it in. Both these teams are pretty much eliminated, not mathematically, but eliminated. So do they have anything to fight for? Do the 49ers rally around the whole Devondre Campbell thing and be like, hey, we're still a really good team. Don't write us off. We'll be back next year. Like, there's a lot of question marks around this team. And at least on the 49ers side, I don't know who to play.
I'm playing Jawan Jennings more than likely as a flex option because he's been the most targeted receiver on that team and he's actually catching passes on like Deebo Samuel. And I think that's literally it. There's situations where I could see somebody needing to play Patrick Taylor. If you were somebody
And
who
George Kittle.
had Christian McCaffrey and then relied on Jordan Mason and then went back to CMC and then ended up with Garendo, like if you never found somebody else other than that Niners backfield to fill that spot, he might be your best option. But at the same time, I still think there was waiver options this week that ended up being better plays than that. If you can even go check now with this game we haven't gotten to yet and won't talk a lot about, if Kendre Miller's still out there and there's no Kamara, that's an option. The problem is Kamara might be a game time decision, and then you might put yourself in a box. He plays Monday night. But then like Jerome Ford, if you were able to add him, he's a better play than Patrick Taylor will be. So I mean, go check for some of those guys that we had out there on the wire to see if they're still there. If not, maybe Patrick Taylor is your best guy. I'm not loving it, but it's possible.
Yeah, and then obviously George Kittle can definitely still be on your lineup in the 49ers. But
Yeah.
on the Dolphins side, like, is Tua in that streaming mix after, his kind of up and down performance last week? Obviously, Devon A. Chan is still in your lineup. Tyreek Hill, those guys are still in your lineup. Jalen Waddle's injury is one to monitor.
I'm probably avoiding
not,
him if he does play. It's just been too inconsistent.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. So this game that used to be all the fantasy options down to just one or two, but still should be a pretty good game.
Definitely. And to answer your question, I do think Tua is somewhere in that streaming consideration. Probably don't love him as much as like a Sam Darnold or I'm trying to remember who we were talking about before, Matt Stafford, but he's probably right about there.
Hammer Mahomes.
Playoff ankle.
Okay. George is all bought into this playoff ankle that only we started, but that's fun. Sunday Night Football. Buccaneers at Cowboys. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if I love this game, at least in terms of viewing potential. Like, it can go.
There's wild card considerations to go on here because like the Bucs are still trying to see if they can get into wild card talks if they don't win their division.
Yeah, I guess that's true, especially with the likelihood that the Commanders drop one to the Eagles as well to make that even more interesting.
Yeah, I think that would be in a game back with 2 left. It's possible.
But Buccaneers, Cowboys, in terms of fantasy wise, you're playing. I think Baker's a good streaming option this week. I mean, he's probably
He's probably not a streaming option because he's probably owned, but yeah.
He's probably I have 2 quarterbacks on my roster. Which one do I want to play? I like Baker Mayfield.
Like 3 different leagues this year.
Mike Evans, definitely. I think McMillan's in play. He's had a really nice last couple of weeks. And then on the Cowboys side, Rico Dowdle, I think he can be in your lineup. He is, since their bye week and they named him the starter and they're giving him starter cut touches, he's had all but one good week or all but one bad week.
Definitely. He's been the maybe an underrated savior for some of these playoff teams that were a flex short or a running back short.
And I was right the first time. It's all but one good week, right?
All but one good week, yes.
Yes.
Yes, you got it right. And then obviously CD Lamb.
Yeah. And other than that, like, I meant as like a viewing potential, like this could either be like I guess every game is this way, but this game truly feels like, is it going to be a shootout? are we going to get a 13-10 slugfest where none of these teams can do anything? Or are we going to get a Buccaneers 40-12 game? Like, I don't think the only option I don't think is out there is the Cowboys blowing out the Buccaneers.
Yeah, not with Cooper Rush in there. I'm with you.
But hey, it should be fun. Chris Collinsworth will love it. That's for sure.
There's a guy.
All right.
Quick touch on Monday Night Football just because of the injury.
Yeah, Kamara's not going to play. His season might be over. Like, so make sure you go check and see if Kendra Miller is available. That came out today that the groin injury is more severe than they thought. So it's more likely that his season's over than he plays this week. So he's out this week. Now, the Packers have been pretty good against the run. But Kendra Miller is going to get the opportunity. Spencer Rattler is going to start. So a lot of banged up Saints, but they have been one of those pesky teams that just fight, right? So we talk about the Carolina Panthers the same way. They haven't been very good, but they have fought a lot of teams and made them play a 4-quarter game. And the Saints are going to do that against the Packers team that, could potentially already have the playoffs clinched, depending how things break before this game even happens, which could make some things interesting, but most likely they're playing to clinch a playoff spot. And I think they show up. So we'll talk more about it on Monday, but if you have a Packers player, I think you can play most of them. The wide receivers gets a little iffy, but I think Watson, Reed, Dobbs are all in consideration.
If you have any specific questions about it, either drop them in the comments before we get out of here or send us a DM and we're willing to help you out. One more game. Why don't you hit the bumper for our Thursday night preview?
Do I have one of those?
Yes, you do. That's why I tried to give you the little hint, like you can hit the bumper.
I had to go look for it.
Broncos at Chargers coming up in a little more than a half hour, I think it is. Over under 41, and Denver an underdog on the road by 2.5. Literally, I think that's just home field. They're calling this a push besides home field advantage for that spread there.
I mean, yeah, I guess. So first question, Bo Nix or Patrick Mahomes?
Bo Nix.
All right, you're rolling with Bo Nix even against this Chargers. This Chargers defense took a hit last week. They were pretty scary to go up against, but then Baker Mayfield and boys lit them up. So
yeah,
good week for Broncos, good week for Cortland Sutton, good week for Bo Nix. Is there any Broncos running back?
Emergency situation, Javonte Williams, but not. I'm avoiding it everywhere I can.
Javonte Williams or Patrick Taylor? I just want to know how much of an emergency we're talking.
Man, I'd probably go Patrick Taylor.
Okay, so then it's not even an option, really.
No, not really. You're right.
Okay. Wow. I didn't think it would be that low, but you're probably right.
It depends. Like, he has one good week every 6. Are you going to get it? That's the question. Do you want to put your fantasy playoffs on? Let's get that one good Javonte Williams week every month and a half.
I mean, I'm not going to say you're wrong. You have a very good point. So, and I'm not chasing McLaughlin or any of those guys.
No.
Let's talk Chargers side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Ladd McConkey got back. He had his targets. He got the touchdown. Quentin Johnson had another double-digit target this past week. I know I am a little bit worried about Quentin Johnson because he plays drumming on the outside. I think you'll see a lot of Pat Surtain. So I am worried about him this week. But what are your thoughts since you are our resident Chargers fan?
Oh my gosh. I haven't found a league where I put him into my lineup yet. So he's not really that high on my flex rankings, but there's definitely teams that aren't as deep as mine that I think could use it. Don't love it with the red matchup, with the fact that he's probably going to be lined up on Surtain. I think Ladd McConkey is definitely the better play, but I'm not forcing it.
Yeah, I know I'm playing Ladd McConkey, and I don't feel great about that one either. I'm looking up, hey, McLaughlin's inactive, so definitely don't play him.
No, I mean, Denver's defense is still fantastic, but there's been a little bit of a fall from grace recently. Like, they were the number one team against receivers in fantasy about a month ago. They're now to 7th best. They've gotten beat up a few times. I'm not saying Herbert's going to be the guy to do that, but the Chargers passing game has improved a lot ever since their bye week. and the fact that they haven't had J.K. Dobbins recently, they've been needing to throw the ball a little bit more. So I don't think it's going to be a complete shutout. I think you're going to get a couple of points. You're going to have a couple opportunities, but it's definitely not your most favorable matchup.
Yeah. I don't know what jerseys they're wearing, but I would love to see the Broncos wearing orange and the Chargers wearing their royal blue. I don't think
a little nod to the color rush.
Yeah, I don't think that would happen, but I would love to see it. It is worth noting, though, with the Chargers, I know we were kind of talking about no Will Dissly. He's inactive again. So what are the chances of playing Stone Smart? The Chargers did activate Hayden Hurst off of IR prior to this game. So I think that takes both of them out of consideration for me.
I agree. There's other options you'll find that have better chances at grabbing touchdowns, like Zach Ertz, for example, or not Hayden Hurst. Mike Gesicki is who I was thinking of. People like that who are probably going to be pretty widely available on the wire.
For sure. All right. I think that we'll wrap it up. I know we're going a little bit long here. One last question.
Okay.
We saw it on the internet over the weekend, and I just want to bring it up because I think it's very fun. Someone complaining about being in a 64-person fantasy football league. And we talk about all the times, we love these crazy ideas where they essentially, you share quarterback. So two people can have the same quarterback, which I think is a lot of fun in a 64. And they were debating between, they lost Odell Beckham, so they needed to pick somebody up. And it was between like Bo Melton and someone else. But George, would you ever play in a 64-man fantasy football league?
I would say no and then find myself in one a day and a half later. So I'll just go ahead and say yes. It's absolute chaos. It's probably dumb because you're scoring 15, 20 points a week probably. But man, I think it would be kind of fun.
Yeah, I kind of just want to do the draft. Like I just want to see how how it drafts. Maybe we'll try to find a website to do a mock draft like that in the off season, but we still have 3 weeks left of the playoffs. It is fantasy semifinals this week. Hopefully, Eastern time. If you have questions, make sure you're in our DMs on all the social channels at the Couch GMs, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, all those good places. Best of luck this week. We'll be back on Monday to recap this week and get you ready for the quick turnaround for Christmas Day games. We'll see you then. I'm Cody Rocap. That's George Kurth. Good luck this week.